Hey guys, I just wanted to let you know that there might be some spoilers in this video. It's going to be a little bit off the cuff, so I'm not sure exactly if I'm going to get into spoilers, but honestly, for this movie, I don't think it's that important, so I wouldn't worry about it too much if I were you. Guys, we need to talk about the Uncharted movie. This video, like I said in the beginning, is going to be a little bit off the cuff. I don't have a specific script or anything, just a couple of bullet points I want to go through, but I've been thinking about this movie a lot since I saw it, and I think there's a lot that needs to be said about what this movie means. Because, listen, guys, this isn't a good movie. It's not some masterpiece of cinema or anything like that. It makes a lot of technical errors. I mean, the pacing is so awful. It's breakneck, and none of the character moments have ever really landed for me because of that. Specifically in the beginning of the movie, I mean, there was just way too much exposition. The first two or three scenes in specific were painful to get through because they just constantly had to be catching up all of the people who hadn't played the games before. And it made it really hard, I think, for the actors to deliver their lines properly. I mean, maybe this was just me or the sound setup of the theater I was in, but I couldn't understand a thing Mark Wahlberg was saying for the first couple scenes of the movie. He was just spouting historic jargon that I don't think he even understood, and it made it really hard to follow as an audience member. In addition to all of this, I mean, while we couldn't expect any better, the villains were just terrible. They had absolutely no substance to them. I think the thing they were setting up with that one guy and his dad could have led to an interesting conflict, a more interesting villain, but honestly, there was no time in this movie to set up any of that. They had to develop Nate and Sully and their relationship, not to mention they introduced Chloe, expecting them to make two more compelling villains would just be impossible in this 2 hour time limit. Which I'm not saying that to defend them, they they need to be able to create compelling characters with their restrictions, but honestly I just think they took on too much here. That's one of the largest things I think that led to the terrible pacing. There is way too much for them to cover in just 2 hours. Each of the games is at least 10 hours. Uncharted 2 is more like 20 hours. And they were trying to tell a complete Uncharted story in just two. It felt really, really rushed. It also didn't really help that the movie felt very derivative of Uncharted 4. I get it. That's the game that the most people have seen. It has the most audience appeal, and it makes perfect sense to base a lot of the movie off of that game. But it still felt really disappointing that they were neglecting a lot of other source material that was available. But despite all of these terrible things that the movie does wrong, I think there has been way too much criticism and hate towards this movie. Because, obviously, like I said, it's not a good movie. But I really think that there's a soul here, a heart to this movie that I wasn't expecting. It, on the surface, would seem like an Uncharted movie is just a corporate product to monetize even further one of Sony's most popular game franchises. But really, I think that the people making this movie cared about Uncharted, and they wanted to make a good Uncharted movie. They weren't just copying exactly one of the games or mixing together the fan favorite sections of the games to make the most audience appeal. They were trying something new. They're making kind of an origin story to Nathan and Sully's relationship, which is something that we haven't really seen before. Did they pull it off perfectly? No, but I'm glad that they are trying something new, and I really think it recontextualizes a lot of the problems that people have with this movie. I think a lot of people have been saying that the characters feel off, that Sully doesn't have a mustache, and all of that would be a big problem to me if they were trying to make a movie about Nathan Drake in his prime when he's already had a fully developed relationship with Sully, but they're not. They're making an origin story, and I think it excuses a lot of the flaws and the inaccuracies within the characters. Obviously, this doesn't fit in exactly to the beginning of the Uncharted story because all of these set pieces and action bits and him meeting Chloe would never have happened before the games in the actual canonical story. But I think in creating this kind of parallel universe, it can still help flesh out the characters a lot. And I think that's the important bit that a lot of people are kind of missing, is just that this isn't trying to show you Nolan North as Nathan Drake. It's trying to show you young Drake, which is why I think it excuses more that they're using younger actors. Believe me, I was as upset as anybody that they were casting Tom Holland and Mark Wahlberg instead of Nathan Fillion. But when you reconsider when this movie takes place, I think it all makes a lot more sense, and the casting is really more effective in this movie than it would have been otherwise. In addition to that, I really feel like this movie, it's not just lacking things to love. For example, the fan service. I mean, I'll be the first to admit that I'm a sucker for good fan service, but I think it was really well done here. It was paced well throughout the movie. It wasn't just all crammed in there, just to say, hey, see that? Remember that? That's from the games. No, it felt meaningful, especially in the more subtle instances of it. Starting the movie with Nathan hanging from the cargo flying out of the plane, and then coming back to that halfway through the movie, is such a subtle reference to the structure of Uncharted 2 that it almost might not be intentional, but I feel like it is, because the fan service is just so well done here that it's not forced into your face. It enhances the experience of the movie by calling back to the games in meaningful ways. There are other examples of this too, and other examples of more direct fan service, like the Naughty Dog sticker in Nathan's briefcase or chest or whatever, which I really enjoyed, but I'll save some of those for you guys to discover. The action as well. God, I was not expecting to enjoy the action as much as I did. I mean, all of it is really green-screened and impractical stunt work, which is what I was expecting, but I feel like they pulled it off so well. You could see everything that was going on. There weren't too many cuts, in my opinion. It was well choreographed. The way they combined hand-to-hand fighting with some parkour in the action scenes made it really engaging. And they got really inventive with it. That final action scene set piece at the end with the flying ships and the helicopters. This isn't really a spoiler. I'm pretty sure it's been in some trailers. But, God, it was so cool. Like, you see them going on this whole pirate treasure hunt, and you're like, man, that's so derivative of Uncharted 4, that's not an original idea at all. But then they pull this out of their ass, and it really makes it feel like its own thing, because that's such an interesting and unique set piece that they've never used in the games before. They're not just copying it straight from the games, even though they did do that at points, but I think it was handled well overall. And I'll be honest, the final action scene on the boats, it felt a little bit weak. I honestly wish there had been more guys for Nate and Sully to fight, and that they had been fighting for a little bit longer. But I think, as cheesy as it is, the moment at the end of how Sully saves Nate is really, it's just a nice moment. And I think it ties back into the whole idea of this movie is about building their relationship, about how they became friends. You can't expect them to start out so chummy with each other as they are. And with the pacing problems and a lot of the kind of weak writing, it's not done perfectly. And I understand why people are upset by that and how they wish that this origin story had been more emotional. But I really feel like it's a simple story, and I think that the way that Sully saves Nate is just a great way to encapsulate his whole journey, even if it's cheesy and kind of over the top. So yeah, sue me. I like the Uncharted movie. Despite all of its flaws, it really feels like something special. Like it was a passion project that, obviously, while intended just as a way to make money, was really led by people who cared about Uncharted and who wanted to appreciate the roots of the series and the games and everything that has been built up for 10 years while still making an original story, not just directly copying any of that. And no, it's not a good movie. No critic is ever gonna consider this a good movie, but at the end of the day, I don't think that's the most important thing here, because I had fun with the movie, and I hope you can too. Thanks for watching.